Welcome to Trine Days Roundtable 22. The JFK legacy as a vision for economic justice and world peace. I am Bruce Tatoris, moderating. First, some presentations, and then we will have questions and answers with everyone. Alanna Hartzok will present. Alanna is an Earth rights visionary, preaching the gospel of the economics of Henry George and much more. And then Alanna will bring Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould into the discussion. Paul and Liz are husband and wife, writers and journalists who wrote the book that inspired these roundtables, The Valediction. It's their 2-volume story of the truths they found in Afghanistan about the Soviet invasion in the early 1980s. Truths that the American media did not want anyone to know. Paul and Liz have written a proposal for world peace based on economic justice, and that can be found online at valediction.net. Click World Peace in the top banner. But first, our host, who has published more than 160 books in the past 20 years, books that question official history and show us things that we can't find anywhere else, Kris Millegan.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to thank people for giving us your time, because, time is one thing that keeps on rolling around. And the older we get, the less we have. Okay. And so some basic questions. Why are we here? And what can we do? Well, we can, hopefully we're here to take care of our fellow human beings and to take care of our great Mother Earth that sustains us all here on this beautiful blue planet, hurtling through space. And then, what can we do? Well, we can do good, we can do bad, we can, do nothing. But I truly think that, we're here to do something, okay? And one thing I like is a table and discussion, because we've got a lot of problems, and anybody will tell you that. But so how are we going to deal with them? And, you can have somebody say, okay, you do this, you do that, you do that. You can have somebody with a gun come up and say, hey, you better do that. But, it's time has, given us this republic with all of its flaws. But like the founder said, we're on our way to a more perfect union. And the way to get that is through discussion, figuring out how to do it. And I when Paul and Liz came at me with their book, I read it and I says, there's more here to this book than was just on the page. And here we have it. So onwards, let's have a great meeting.
Excellent.
Amen.
Thank you, Kris. And now, as previously mentioned, Alanna Hartzok.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Bruce. And greetings, and happy that you showed up to old friends and new. This very creative and synchronicity type of relationship began just 8 months ago with Liz Gould and Paul Fitzgerald, and then this gang of 4, which is Bruce Tatoris and Robert Millegan. We've been having these very thematic Earth rights and imperial mystical imperialism discussions now for the several months since I've joined. I've been asked to give some examples of how the policy prescription that Henry George brought forward has been implemented in 4 places. There are many more, but I'm going to focus on 4. And I will say that Henry George simply brought forth a perennial wisdom teaching. He rediscovered the basic wisdom teachings on how to have a fair, functional, harmonic society. And that's basically that the earth has to be shared, respected, treated as a trust, and not treated for profit or gain. This was the economics that was very inspiring when Liz heard about it a few months ago, and she saw that this would be a basis for economics of peace. And she had for many years, she and Paul been working with JFK's very important peace speech that he gave at American University a year before his assassination. So I'm going to talk about the Alaska Permanent Fund and land reform in California, and then 2 cities in Pennsylvania out of the 18 or so that have partially even implemented the policy approach, which is a public finance or taxation reform, actually quite simple to implement, just needing popular support. So the Alaska Permanent Fund, that being the 50th, or was it the 49th, the last 2 states brought into the Union, when they realized they would be getting a lot of money from corporations because of the need for access to oil. And the oil rent was very important. So Alaska has a commons. It has a common state constitution. It says that the natural resources belong in common to the people of the state. So when they were about to be extracting the oil, the then Governor Hamill encouraged the people to have discussions, and out of that came the Alaska Permanent Fund, which captured the unearned income, what we might call the commons rent of the oil resources of Alaska, and then was placed into a fund, an investment fund, out of which for the past several decades, each and every person, including children in Alaska, has received an annual dividend. Year of 2022, last year, each person, and the only requirement is being in Alaska 1 year, residing 1 year, received more than $3,300. That's a cash in the check in the mail in October. That's pretty significant addition income, say a family of 4, more than $13,000. So the people understand that this dividend is theirs by right of ownership of the oil resources of their state. They are highly educated about the importance of the fund. They look forward to receiving their dividends. I've written both a praise and some comments for improvement of the permanent funds and criticism. One is, if we want to shift to renewable energy, which one way or the other we need to, is not to base a citizen dividend or a citizen income on the depletable mineral resources. But the way to base a dividend could be from a very, very substantial source of unearned income, and that's surface land. So we begin to think of the surface land as a natural resource, as a commons, that we have a right to by gift of birthright to the planet, not because we had to get a job and we had to buy land and then have a lot of money, interest payments to mortgages from the banks, but ours by right. So now to the Right Act, WRIGHT, of California, early 1900s, when one person, Henry Miller, came to own 1 million acres of land. So obviously this prevented people who wanted to farm from getting affordable access. So a school teacher who understood what Henry George was all about got elected to the state legislature, and he passed the Right Act. That meant that there could be bonds issued, money raised for establishing irrigation districts in Alaska, in this region of the central region of California. It would be paid for by the increase in the land value. Of course, any infrastructure and improvements you make on the surface of land is reflected in an increase in that land value. So then the bonds would be paid off by that increased land value when the irrigation was established. So this went through, and it resulted in a land reform where about 7,000 small farmers were able to get affordable access, because the big landowner did not want to just keep paying for this increased tax on his land. So he was willing to let it go, and it would be able to be purchased with affordable price. This area of the Central Valley, apart from being a very formulated land reform, they started using this land rent or commons rent to finance other infrastructure and utilities for the growing communities. And there's been research showing that these communities were much healthier, much more diverse in the local economy than, of course, the communities that formed in then corporate agriculture areas. Now, what happened to the RIGHT Act, the successful the successful irrigation localized public finance policy is this. The first lien on your land, if you did not pay your land value tax or your commons rent, went to the community. The second went to the bank. Primarily, it was going to be Bank of America, other big banks. The banks obviously did not like this being second in line. So they brought this to the Supreme Court until the third time in the Supreme Court, this ability to have financed irrigation and other infrastructure in those areas was completely abolished, completely canceled out. So now we have income taxes paid from everybody in the United States to subsidize corporate agriculture and their federally subsidized irrigation. So this was an example where there was not enough popular power or understanding of the importance to keep this in place. So this is an example of how the banks can get in the way. And in my view, how we need like the public banks that the Public Banking Institute, Ellen Brown, who wrote Web of Debt, is building movements towards. The third example is the capital city of Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, which in the late 1970s was the second most distressed city in the United States. Only East St. Louis was number one. So by federal distressed city criteria, Harrisburg was number two. They were desperately trying to find approaches that would help save the city when they came across this very, very important property tax reform. They began shifting their property tax off of buildings, production, and onto the value of the land location. Now, the city of 50,000 had about 4,000 boarded up buildings, quite depressed. With this relatively small application of shifting the property tax off of the buildings and onto the land value, those with boarded up buildings, the land hoarders and land speculators, were going to have to either start fixing up their property or sell it to people who are willing to do so. And that's exactly what happened. So it went to just from 4,000 to just a few hundred boarded up buildings in just a few years. The other thing that was remarkable is that jobs increased. Of course, you're having buildings, so you're having the local economy, jobs. You're having small businesses, that is where you find the hardware when you fix up your house. And you also had a decrease in arson and a decrease in crime. And this worked so well, along with their other very positive approaches to city development, that the city began winning awards, environmental and other awards. And so it's a very important example, but there are also many, many other cities in Pennsylvania and other places worldwide where we find similar positive influence. I want to go now to our third largest city of Pennsylvania, which is Allentown. So Allentown, again, a depressed city looking for solutions. They voted in a home rule charter that gave their city more power for local decision-making and control. And along with the home rule charter, they voted to switch their property tax base to this land value capture. You could call it different things, land value tax. I like to call it the commons rent, because you're actually capturing the rent of the common land for the common people, for common wealth. The second vote was called for by a few large landowners who were going to pay more. So here you might say this is the local power structure that didn't like this policy at all. They were going to pay more. So they had media ads and they did a big effort. They had little airplanes flying with banners for the second vote to get the people to vote no. for the land value tax. But there was enough public education, door-to-door knocking and telling people how this was to the benefit, that the second vote, the people voted for the shift to land value tax and to freeze any and all other local taxes. So comparing Allentown to nearby Bethlehem, that was getting federally subsidized funds for development, and Allentown not so much, we saw the indicators for the internal revitalization of the city of Allentown very significantly, showing that this was the best policy if you're going to start getting your city to turn around and build your local based economy, decentralized, not needing public subsidies, just by collecting the land value, the rent, the commons rent that's created by the community as a whole anyhow, simply returning this back to the community, and then removing taxes from productive forces. So there's 4 quick examples of how this works, how to get it to work, how with Allentown we can actually vote in economic democracy. It's just a matter of enough people understanding what to do and moving forward with the idea, both as activists to implement the policy and also as voters to keep the policy going and extending it. So that's my 4 examples, and thank you for your attention. And now I believe we're to shift now to the amazing story that Liz Gould and Paul Fitzgerald will be telling us about the mystical imperialism and this next interesting stage that has recently arrived at the doorstep.
Well, I'll just start in here, Bruce. Thank you, Alanna. Thank you for the setup of the practical way in which this can, in fact, not just create the kind of basic community we need, but it also is directly connected to creating literally an economy of peace. And that is the key to understanding. Without the economy of peace, we are not going to stop the war. And that is one of the things that has to be understood. And I think more and more people across this country, if they really understood that power of these kind of policies can actually turn us from an economy of war into an economy of peace, it would happen very rapidly, just like in Allentown. Once the people know the truth, it will stick with us. But what we really want to focus on now is another aspect of our story. If you remember from the invitation that went out about this roundtable, we introduced you to a component that we have been working with, and it's a part of our books in the Valediction series, where we're working with the history of the Fitzgerald family. And part of the reason we focused on JFK's peace speech was because we recognized through the legacy of the Fitzgerald family going back to its creation in Ireland, going back to the original Fitzgerald, Gerald Fitzgerald, marrying Princess Nest and starting the family line in 1094 or 1094, I think.
Close enough.
Yeah. And what that legacy became was I think they used to refer to the Fitzgeralds eventually, who were the Norman invaders of Ireland in 1169, who became more Irish than the Irish by the time they were decimated by Queen Elizabeth by the end of the Desmond Wars in 1153. So what we're really connecting to was this powerful mythology about the importance of the Fitzgeralds to the people of Ireland. And mythology works around and talks a lot about the return of Geard Jarla, who is this kind of mythological summation of the Fitzgerald legacy that went on for 400 years, from the time of the invasion until the destruction of the family by the Elizabethans. And through that power, we felt this is what we recognized in what JFK was doing. He was trying to bring forth this power of this legacy to be with the people and bring the peace to the people. Well, it turned out that when we originally got involved with the Fitzgerald family, it was actually triggered by a dream our daughter had in 1991, when she was visited by Paul's father, and circumstances that convinced Paul that he had to go look in the family history. Well, that happened in 1991. Well, in 2023, we got a piece of information from Ed Dodson, who is here, who is basically a Georgist expert and a scholar and a researcher, who came up with information about the fact that John Fitzgerald, who was JFK's grandfather, and he was the mayor of Boston, was a Georgist. And he was trying to implement the Georgist solutions for Boston. And this would have been in 1911. Okay. So what we want to do now is we wanted to tie that to the basic idea that what Honey Fitz was actually doing was in almost preparation for what he had prophesied, which was the birth, which was the elevation of his grandson to presidency. And what JFK tried to do was implement it. So what we see now is a direct connection to what we're trying to do, creating the economy of peace through the Georgist solution, is a continuation of this Fitzgerald legacy. So I want to invite Ed into the conversation, and Alanna. So we're going to be, going over a little bit of your role as the Georgist who brought us this important information, tying in with this aspect of, as I like to say, Ed, to you. I don't know if you ever imagined that the piece of information you provided us was when my daughter had the dream in 1991, which was the alpha, you provided the omega in 2023 by finding the information about Honey Fitz. So we just wanted, you to get your part of the story in here.
Well, there are all sorts of coincidences in history and our experiences. We're engaged in all sorts of activities. We don't know where they're going to take us all the time. And my role within the Georgist community, which is a role I took on my own, is to become the movement's historian. And so over a long period of time, I have been going through all of the records that I've had access to. And most recently, in the last couple of years, that has involved going through the weekly newspaper, The Public. The Public was published from 1898 through 1919, edited by Lewis F. Post. And Post is quite a remarkable figure. He was an attorney, author, right-hand man, so to speak, for Henry George in his political campaigns. He ended up working in the Woodrow Wilson administration after he completed his editorship of The Public. And so going through The Public, this is a weekly publication. Each issue is about 25 pages, and I have been reading them one at a time, going back to 1898, and basically identifying individual articles and editorials, coding them so that they can be uploaded to my internet project, which is called the School of Cooperative Individualism, and making this material available for scholars and researchers and anyone who's actually interested in learning about the progressive side of the social sciences. And so I've made it through all of the issues from 1898 to 1911. I've just started on 1912, and I just, without even really knowing what I was coming across, came across the information about Honey Fitzgerald becoming the mayor of Boston and his involvement with the local single tax community there. I'm actually sure that if I had access to the records of the Henry George Club that was in Boston and the Henry George School that was also originated in Boston, that there would be probably a lot more detailed records than I've been able to have access to, but I don't know where those records are actually, or if they still exist. But that's where I am with this, and I'm glad to have found the information and committed to pass on any more information that I come across, but also invite anyone who has an instinct for doing historical research to visit my website. All of the issues of The Public have been uploaded in full. It will take me about another 2 years to get through the years 1912 through 1919 to resurrect the material that seems important, code it into the computer, and then upload it for future scholars and research.
As Ed just said, it's going to take him alone another 2 years. Anybody who has some interest in helping us find more of the stories about Honey Fitz, now that's what we're looking for right now. In fact, we actually have a story to tell you that's in addition to the story about Honey Fitz. Behind us, we have a piece of furniture that arrived here. Is that visible? Is that,
Yeah,
can people
can see
see
it.
that okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, this basically is Paul's grandfather's writing desk. This is the grandfather who sat down with Honey Fitz when he was the head of the Carmen's Union, right? And he had to meet with him because there was going to be a strike and there were issues, and they had come to the decision that they knew that they were related, and whatever else happened between them, they had this exchange. And it turns out that when he must have died in the family, the writing desk was taken by Paul's oldest brother, William. And of course, in the Fitzgerald family, William is usually the name of the first son. And so he got the desk, but he didn't really have a place for it. But for some reason, even though he had no place for it, he kept it. Well, he ended up keeping it from probably the early 1950s, maybe it would have been.
1959.
Right, 1959. And he ended up relocating it from where they lived in Concord, Mass, to a house that they had up in northern New Hampshire. And it sat probably in a garage up there too. And eventually they moved from there. Bill and his wife moved down to Florida. But for some reason, last month, Bill decided to come up for a visit for the first time in a while and stay for the whole month. And for reasons we're not completely sure, they mentioned the fact that the chest was in his neighbor's garage because they had sold their house. So they had no place for it at that point. And would Paul like it? So this chest has taken a long time to get here. But what we realized about it, and I think this is the point that we wanted to make about the implication of up along the top level of this are photographs of Paul's father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-great-grandfather. They're all Williams. Okay. Bill, his oldest brother, was not a writer, though. And we feel that for some reason, that was the reason he kept it in his garage. He knew he had to keep it. He had to keep it. And he must have even known somehow, some way, he actually had to get it to Paul. Because what has happened now is that through this desk arriving, and the four grandfathers are sitting above the books that we have written, that Paul has written about the Fitzgerald family. So in some way, we feel we're getting some kind of confluence of something that is beginning to manifest in a reality. It's no longer in the mystical realm. When Alyssa had the dream, that was in the mystical realm and we had to interpret it, but we had no hard evidence yet. We consider this to be hard evidence, just like the information about Henry George being connected to Honey Fitzgerald, and the idea that Honey Fitzgerald literally was trying to create the economy of peace in Boston that his grandson could have used to help create a world of peace when he was president. And there is one little extra up here that, again, I know you probably can't see it, but there is a little carved marble owl that's sitting in front of Paul's picture and his father's picture on the top level. And that represents our daughter, the one who had the dream. Our daughter actually is she considers the owl to be part of her persona, okay? She actually has an owl tattoo. That's how much she is connected to owls. So we just wanted, again, to give you these pieces of the story so you could begin to appreciate, all of you, that even if you don't know that you're participating, you want to move in a little, if you're participating possibly in an activity that's going to help someone else in some way. So we all have to kind of approach everything that way, where we have to think about how this might help someone, anyone out there. And that, I think, will help, help all of us recognize subtle and very delicate messages that may never be manifest because you missed it over and over and over again. So this is a wake-up call for that.
Yeah, yeah. So when my brother Bill arrived and he brought with him the desk, he was transferring something from the oldest son of the oldest son of the oldest son of the oldest son of the oldest son to here, to our address. And because we could certainly put it to use in a way that he was not prepared to. So at any rate, it's the way, I think it's the way things work. You mentioned, Ed, about the nature of coincidence and that sort of thing. And it's really a factor. I mean, Kris has published quite a few books about that. And there's a number of things, very important ideas that were discussed by Jung and Wolfgang Pauli about the nature of coincidence and the fact that it is maybe an unknown agency that is at work. It's like your involvement with quantum physics. Everybody knows that quantum physics is real. It's been proven, it exists, but we don't exactly understand how it works. The movie, everything happens all at once, There are things that happen that there's just no rational, logical explanation for it, but they are very important to us. So it's kind of like, well, we all need to just kind of back off, and certainly at this particular time, to kind of sit back and think about new ways of looking at the world that we're living in, and new ways to interact with it. And thank you, Kris, for all the work you've put into with all the books that you've published and encouraged people to understand this broader world we're living in, and just broaden our own understanding of it. And that's what we need. I mean, this thing about the Georgist economics has been with us. It's been there. My grandfather met with Honey Fitz at one point to try to help the people that they were working for. They wanted to make sure that they didn't throw people out of work, that people needed to get to work, and they had to have a means of getting there. And so they worked it out individually and sat there and decided they traded stories about back in the old country in Ireland. My grandfather didn't get here until around 1900. So, he was a grown man by the time he finally showed up, and he brought those stories with him. So I'm sure they must have had a rollicking time when they sat there. I wish I'd been a fly on the wall for that one. At any rate.
I have a couple of comments that might be of interest if you're not already aware of this, but you just brought them to mind when you talked about your family's history going back to Ireland. Henry George lectured extensively throughout Ireland, and one of the people he influenced rather significantly was the Irish nationalist Michael Davitt. And I would expect that the Fitzgeralds very much were aware of and perhaps involved in that Irish nationalist effort that not only Davitt, but Charles Parnell was another of the major leaders. And all of Henry George's work contributed to raising an extensive amount of interest among Irish Americans in the struggles in Ireland. He was a correspondent for the Irish World, which was published in New York City and sent back, article after article of what was going on in Ireland. And his fame, Henry George's fame, increased incredibly because he was arrested and put in jail for a day or two by the British authorities. And when that was reported back in the United States, Henry George all of a sudden became an international figure. So, all of this is very connected, I'm sure, with the Fitzgerald family and their involvement in Irish American affairs in late 19th century, early 20th century Boston.
Wow.
Ed, why was he arrested?
He was a suspicious character. I forget what the exact. They were afraid that what he was doing was telling the truth, and people were listening.
Wow.
A form of censorship, you might say.
Yeah.
But
Well,
didn't take much to get arrested by the British, that's for sure.
Do we agree it's time to invite everyone to ask any questions that they might have for the remainder of the, yes, Liz?
Yeah, I just want to make one overall sweeping statement. This whole conversation, is to get to a point of action. And we feel that part of what we all want you all to think about is our goal is to get this information about the Georgist solution out into the world. And we feel that there is an amazing opportunity with this connection to Honeyfitz. And we do have a Fitzgerald running for president. And we think that, and we're not just focused on RFK alone, we're focused on the whole presidential race and saying, hey, why don't we try to use this as the opportunity to try to get this into the system with the hope that because of RFK's personal connection to this, he will be motivated to actually really wanting to take this far more seriously, possibly, than he would have without this information. So that's part of our goal. So everybody think about that kind of connection. And we have to, obviously create, the information necessary so that, you'll have access to it. So we do have information on this. Alanna has a lot of, addresses and locations and websites, but we definitely want to put everybody into that mode of realizing what we think we want to get this into is the presidential discussion.
And if, when you, with your questions, you could raise your hand, you can click the thing to raise your yellow hand, the icon in the thing. I'll see that. I'll try to call on folks one at a time. Who spoke up just now?
That was
Hi,
me.
Kris.
I just, it was mentioned that Mr. George got arrested because he was a suspicious person. And I just wanted to say some nice words about my good friend, Daniel Hopsicker, who really got me into being a publisher. He's the author of Burying the Boys and Welcome to Terrorland. And one thing that he talked about a lot when he would talk, he would say, God bless America. Okay. And one reason he said that was because if he had been in many other countries writing to the depth of what he was writing about, he would have been shot. He would have been killed. Okay. So we are very lucky to live in this country that our founders, they fought for. Okay. Because we do have freedom. We do have more freedom here than a lot of people around this globe. Okay. So I just wanted to say thank you to Daniel Hopsicker and God bless America.
Thank you, Kris.
Here.
And folks can go to Daniel's site at Mad Cow Prod for productions to learn about what he published. And I am looking for the first question. Who has it? Well, Ruth, you commented thusly in the chat. The confluence that Liz speaks is an example of quantum entanglement. Would you like to embellish that for us, please?
I have to say, Dean is sitting here and he wrote that, and I'm going to invite him to, I can say it, but Dean is going to indicate that.
Well, I guess the resonance for me had to do with Liz stressing the importance of recognizing that we're all connected in doing this, and each of us has opportunities to be that pebble in the water that sets off ripples that will touch somebody somewhere. And it often feels like we're fairly lonely and dealing with a lot of headwind. So I feel like it's a way of just encouraging everybody to find their voice and find their courage and to take the risk of being unappreciated for what words of love and peace we're bringing forward with what we're doing. So that was my thought.
Okay. I also have,
Lovely.
I love that, Dean. And it's really about the longing, how powerful the longing is. But I think there's something about quantum entanglement, which stories like what Liz is talking about, the specificity of things coming to you, how they're like they fit right in a hole. And that is that there's a, you know, even at the level of our unconscious, there's a vibrational connection that we have with truth. And other beings, we're all coming from the same source, and we have all of this energy in us that knows what truth is. And when one person really resonates with that energy, it can find that resonance in other beings, and it creates an amplification. So there's a quantum entanglement at the level of saying that activates without your even knowing it when you are really committed to that thought.
And that amplification can look like coincidences, and it can also look like miracles. Carol, I see your hand, but I want to invite the person identifying as Quanta Dawn Light to unmute and discuss some of the things you've put in the chat about peace.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey. I'm also a Rotarian, and my focus in Rotary is peace. And all my involvement with all organizations is focused on peace. And right now, I serve on the committee that is promoting this course, Ending War 101, which is an effort between World Beyond War and Rotary Action Group for Peace.
And you
So
put in the chat
yes,
the link worldbeyondwar.org,
right.
and I promise you, people here will click to learn what that is.
Oh, I hope
do-
so.
Can you succinctly, do you have a question related to the material you heard today?
Well, I'm intrigued about the quantum entanglement and how it relates to peace. And of course, like millions of people, I am a fan of John Kennedy. And I remember I was in Istanbul in 1963, 11/22. And I remember getting the newspaper as I was going to school, and I looked, I said, no, that's not true. Because about a month earlier, John Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy came to Istanbul. We had a red carpet for them. And so it was kind of fresh. He just stole the hearts of people in Turkey. So when that happened, we were really saddened. I mean, we were like, we lost a friend, you know.
Yeah.
So I remember from my childhood, I'm 77 years old, so I was a teenager when that happened.
And Quanta, you asked for some elaboration about quantum entanglement and peace. Which of our panel wants to reply to that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can state I'm certainly not so much going to focus on the quantum nature of it technically, but I think in terms of, I think it's about realizing that, as Kris already stated, you have a choice. You can do something really positive, you can do something really negative, or you can do nothing. And I think that we know that there are two choices here. Doing nothing can be important when you really don't know what to do. But when you make a decision, you do have to really think about that positivity and get something. And that's what we feel we're offering. We are offering people a way to come together at a very profound level, with when you include not just the desire for world peace. That's what we were working on for 6 months before we met Alanna and Wendell and the Georgist movement. Okay, we knew instantly that before we were going to get world peace, we've got to get the economy of peace. That's why we've been completely committed to building that understanding. And that's what we need people to understand, that they can contribute instantly by creating that economy of peace at the local level. That's possible once you understand these principles, and that it's been done, and that's what it actually produces. It produces a calmness and a reasonableness in the community, okay? And it lessens the ability of people who can take advantage, basically, of many Americans are simply ignorant of a lot of their history and a lot of the things that, if they knew them, I think Alanna's example specifically of what happened in one of her examples where the community lost use of these powerful tools, okay, because they didn't understand how to make sure they kept them. That didn't happen in Allentown because they knew they needed all the people, and that's it. That's a secret. But once
Economic
you
justice,
understand-
right, based on those,
Exactly.
and I would repeat the destination where folks could learn most succinctly, brand newbies who are hearing about the economics of Henry George. Alanna, what's the top resource online you would steer
Well, I'm
people
gonna
to?
refer them to, and I put it in the chat, the International Union for Land Value Taxation.
Yeah, theiu.org.
To join up the newsletter.
Thank
My
you.
book, The Earth Belongs to Everybody's there is a free
Yeah.
PDF with the details of what I talked
Yeah.
about today.
Yeah,
But then I
thank
have
you.
another, if I may, synchronicity quantum entanglement story.
Oh,
2
oh.
hours ago, I talked to a Carmela, and she was in the Kennedy administration. And we got connected with her because some of us are working for Equinox Earth Day, March 2024, which will bring forth the economics of peace of the original Earth Day founder, John McConnell, who was a Georgist. So this woman is planning for big events around the world for November 22nd. And she is very much, of course, involved with the Kennedy peace speech, but she's not yet onto the economics of peace that we are. So we think there's a lot of promise in working with Carmela. Again, quantum entanglement.
Excellent. Then, Marty, I saw you wave, but before you waved, I see Carol waiting patiently. I'll invite Carol Brouillet to unmute and share any comment or question, please.
Well, I live near San Francisco, where Henry George made quite an impact. And it's also close to the home of Gray Brecken, who wrote a book, San Francisco, Imperial Power, Earthly Ruin. And Brecken looks at the larger picture and of empire and how empires were built often upon the slave labor of people, and how empires needed to eradicate the population in order to build their empire and push people off the land. And I can't help but feel that right now, with the recent disaster in Hawaii, people are very concerned about the land grabs that are going on, and strange events, anomalies, fires, which are dispossessing people of their lives, their homes, their land, and this sort of dark, shadowy land grab that's taking place with the cooperation of governments and corporations and these public-private partnerships that are taking place. And I'm wondering if that is also a place for a conversation to open about these issues that you raise, because I think it's on a lot of people's minds right now.
Among our panel, any reply, comment?
I mean, I'll go.
Reckon it's a great book. It's a great book. I put links to it in the chat.
Thank you. Alanna,
Well, the land grabbing is coming to a highlight with that focus on maybe directed energy weapons and in Maui and so on. But the land grab has been going on for eons of time. Any way we can bring attention to the problem, if there was not profit to be made in the ownership and control of Mother Earth, there would be no incentive to grab more than your fair share of land. Because with the commons rent, if you have more than your fair share, you are paying way more into the rest of us, the commons rent fund, the rest of us, as if you will, equal shareholders in the earth. There's just simply no incentive for land grabbing, because you would have to pay more the more valuable land you own. So Carol, thank you for bringing that up. the importance of focusing on land grab to get our question out of what is the correct relationship of person to planet, of the human being to our Mother Earth, and then policies based on the perennial wisdom teachings around land trusteeship, which is not the same as absolute ownership.
And I'm going to go to Marty, I promised. Hi, Marty.
It's funny because I always relate to what Liz's sister's saying. So this thing about quantum entanglement, I'm very aware of that all the time. It happens to me all the time, but I think watching Paul with this desk coming in, it's sort of evidence on the unified field, you know, that it's coming really solid on the unified field when it's so tangible as something like this desk. I'm so fascinated with this because I've spent 50 years in the media, Wall Street Journal, Walter Cronkite, newspapers all over the country and television stations. In 2006, I went to the Monterey Institute of International Studies. Anyway, I had a business plan done and it was all about peace being profitable. And that we won't get rid of war until we can prove that peace is profitable. And a lot of these professors at these military universities here are totally into this. So my thing is, as I've told Liz before, is getting this information out to these universities, the Panetta Institute, the DLI, and the Navy Postgraduate School. So
Wonderful.
I think we're making progress. And thank you for letting me just say that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
I am watching everything in the chat, and I'm going to get to everybody in the chat, but I want to invite Ed to speak now or whenever he wants.
Well, as I've been listening and I thought about the coming election, the presidential candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I thought, what would I say to him if I had a sit down with him? And if we talked about the land value tax idea, he would say, well, that's a local property tax issue, isn't it? And I say, well, yeah. The difficulty that communities have is that in every community in the United States, there are 3 or 4 different local taxing jurisdictions that would have to make the change in order to make it effective. But what about what could we do at the federal level? My view is we need fundamental tax reform of our income tax system. It needs to be simplified and made progressive. And made progressive in the sense that higher incomes in the United States are almost all unearned. They're gained by speculation in land markets and real estate and commodities and the stock market. In economic terms, it's called rent seeking, that there are laws that preference rent seeking over productive activity. And so I would say to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the first thing that on your list should be get federal income tax income tax reform. Let's exempt all individual incomes up to the median income, eliminate all exemptions and deductions other than that, and then apply a increasing rate of taxation on higher ranges of income. When you get up to $10, $20 million or more, what's the problem with a 90% marginal tax rate on that income? Because it's almost all unearned. So that would be my message to our candidate.
And it occurs to me, whoever you support, get this challenge of these kind of economics in front of all your candidates.
Yeah.
I would imagine. Ruth, I saw you've got your hand raised for a new thought, please.
Hi. You know, it has to do with the fracturing and the devastation of what's happening in Maui and what that does in terms of quantum entanglement and the loss of personal power. And it also has to do with being able to actually communicate with this community, this information, as a way of creating coherence and a solution to what is being done to them. And it's being done to them and it's insidious and horrible. And they have no power except for if an understanding like this were to be brought to them. Yeah. And I feel like that would create the coherence that would allow what I consider, the quantum entanglement, the kind of empowerment at the spiritual level that would allow them to start to face the power that is trying to devour them.
Ruth, if you could give us some good connections, we could write possibly an open letter to the people of Maui, and we could put all of this information in an open letter. And two, I wanted to mention Eastern Ukraine is mineral resource rich. So that was quote unquote worth fighting over. And the Western part of Ukraine has the deep agricultural soil, and agribusiness corporations wanted access to that. They were not allowed in because they disallowed the GMOs and the glyphosate and so on of corporate agriculture. But now they've gotten control of the land. So the Ukraine war is very much a land and resource war. And to add about the income tax on the federal level, as you would know, the income tax started out as the kind of tax you're proposing, a high level, high end, unearned income type of tax. Over the years, it got built down into a wage tax on workers, which is pretty locked in. I don't frankly personally have any hope that we can do any positive reforms in the federal government level, which is why I believe we need to emphasize the decentralism and the building the local based economy where we're not sending so much of our money to Washington, D.C. for nefarious purposes.
I have a quick point to make. I think, Alanna, I think your point is absolutely well taken. Where do we put our energy? There's no question that we have to put our energy in getting the kind of information that's practical. But I still think Ed's idea of getting this into the head of a presidential candidate like RFK is still worthy, because at some point, when the people of this country really get it, and it starts local because that's the best way to get people educated. When they apply it and see the results, they're going to say, oh my God, now I know why Henry George was one of the most popular speakers in this country at the end of the 19th century. Okay, it will like suddenly the reality. And then when they learn that neoliberalism was created to actually destroy the powerful effect of Georgist economics, I think people are going to begin to put two and two together. So there'll be quick changes after that.
In the chat, Faisal asks this question. Are the Georgists familiar with J.W. Smith's Economic Democracy, the Political Struggle of the 21st Century, and his application of Henry George, Edward or Alanna?
Yeah, I've known him for many years and his work. I have many copies of his book. And I mean, yeah, he makes important points, economics of peace and Georgist economics.
And also earlier, David wrote, I think Carol's analysis is spot on. A new land grab, smart city project here in the California East Bay town of Fairfield in Solano County is in the works. So Kris has also put an amazing amount of resources in the chat. And now it's time for my monthly teaching of how to save the chat for your future reference. Participants, if you've got the chat column open on your right, at the bottom, very bottom, you see 4 or 5 little gray icons and 3 little dots. When you click the 3 little dots, it says save chat. Click that. And then I'll give you a minute to click it again at the end to capture what's still going to come in the chat. And here's the miraculous thing they do for us. That's all you had to do. Then, when this meeting ends and this window closes, don't touch anything right now. Most computers will open a folder. And in that folder, there's going to be one file. And it says meeting chat. It's that record in that file. Then you can cut and paste it into some folder where you'll remember where it is. Then you can even change the file name to say Roundtable 22. And then you've got this, and there's going to be even more amazing resources yet to come. All right, Diane Perlman, speaking of truth and peace, I just posted this tribute to Ellsberg today. Well, we'll reference that in the future Ellsberg, unless Diane, it's very pertinent. You want to share it. Tell us why. Hi, Diane.
Yeah, hi. I don't really have anything I need to say about it, except we had to edit down the tributes, the interviews that people had. So this Todd Pierce, this is the full ones, and they're really great. People said wonderful things. So
Well, it was a landmark year to lose a man like him. Any
Yeah.
question or comment about the roundtable topics?
no, this has been very interesting. I don't have anything to add.
All right. Well, good to see you again. You're a regular here, so appreciate seeing you. Save Maui concert, September 2nd, Carol writes, featuring Eric Clapton and more at kirschsubstack.com. Ed, is that an active hand indicating an active comment question?
It is. I wanted to leave you with this insight that it is important about solving the affordable housing crisis in America. There's a lot of discussion about a universal basic income that should be adopted. There is the one risk with the universal basic income. Without land value taxation, it will put more money in the pockets of landowners. And so unless we have land value taxation, or the common funds collection, as Alanna would describe it, then we need to provide the funds to construct permanently affordable housing. We need millions more units. The Low Income Housing Coalition in Washington estimates we need 7 million affordable housing units. And these need to be constructed, funded somehow in order to help keep our people in housing that they can afford and not living on the streets.
Absolutely crucial. I mean, it's exactly what Henry George saw would happen in California. Prop 13 has frozen the property tax. And those of us in 1970s who understood the disaster that would happen now get to see miles upon miles of homeless encampments of people sleeping in tents. San Francisco is, my children were both born there, and I don't even think I would want to go back to visit. But it is absolutely a land problem. We cannot put the land in the market. We cannot treat it like a commodity. We have to extract the land, make it a trustee, share the land rent, and get the market to work for housing. That's the big question. If the market is so great, if we can get cheaper, better computers every year as we do, why not housing? And people put in your mind that the housing problem is the land problem. It absolutely must be addressed. And at some point, we're going to put out a big call, if not right now, that we need you guys, everybody in the call, to start doing something where you live for implementation, to get on to projects, to get on to go from learning and to doing it. It's really crucial and essential that we step up and start being activists. There's too much suffering around this land problem in my community, where I moved back to Pennsylvania because I could not find affordable housing any longer in California, and I could in small town Pennsylvania. We now have a horrific growing problem of high cost of housing. I'll end with this. A recent woman, she's just one example, because of the housing problem, lost control of her 3 precious children. They were put in foster care, and now they're put up for adoption. She has lost her 3 children, originating in the fact that she could not find affordable housing, even though they were staying with her parents.
Wow, that sounds unjustifiable.
It's absolutely unjustifiable. It is unjust. It is immoral.
Well,
and it's happening under our system now, under our noses.
Why didn't they give the children to the grandparents, or you know, that sounds like it could have been. Anyway, I know this is
Yeah, I read her record because I try to intervene as a friend in the situation. I met with the children and youth, and I met with the one agency above them, and I looked through the records. It all really just came down to them being reported and not getting affordable housing for her children. It really is just that. And at one point she had to be in a hotel with her son, and that was another point against her. Yeah.
Well, you know, that unfortunately, we do have some interlocking problems here. And I think that is important for us to keep in mind, that we obviously can't solve a lot of problems that are all interrelated. I mean, one of the things that's going around the world right now is a lot of the issues about children being, turned into slaves, basically, there's a
And
trade.
sex
in-
slavery.
Right, exactly. So we know that there are big, complicated, messy issues. And I do think, though, that this is the way I like to present this. Okay, step one. Okay, all right, local. What can you do locally to see through something where you have some kind of, it has some kind of an effect and it has a power that you can connect to. All right, that's what's so powerful, I think, about the Georgist information, that it gives you information, even if you personally may not be the one to do it, but you can spread the word to other people within your community. And there invariably is somebody who would become very, very active, because they realize there is a way to become active and effective. And I think that's the secret. It's the effectiveness. That's why Alanna detailed these examples for everybody at the opening so carefully, that whenever these solutions have been applied, even partially, they have almost an immediate effect and they begin to solve problems. And so, like we just said about homelessness, okay, if you understand it is a land problem, it changes your thinking about solutions. And if you realize that the unearned income factor is the motivation for this land speculation, once you remove that, you have literally removed the majority of the motivation. It's not going to stop everybody, obviously.
Well, the great Russian novelist and writer Leo Tolstoy, when he got on to Henry George and he had a huge portrait of him at his desk, he said, solving the land problem solves all social problems.
Yeah.
That sounds extreme, but social problems in terms of what's generated by wealth inequality and so on, solving the land problem solves all these many problems.
That's yeah, exactly.
Hi, Kris.
Ed, a question for Ed here. Is there local chapters of Georgist groups? And how do people find out about them? Because, we can sit around a table and talk, but also if we can, start being active in our local communities, that is good.
Yeah, there's a national organization. It's called Common Ground USA. And there are chapters scattered around the United States. Not everywhere, but the number of chapters is growing as the interest in land value taxation grows. So I would suggest anyone who is interested to find out if there's a chapter anywhere in your state or locality, just to go to the internet and type in Common Ground USA.
There's regional chapters throughout the whole US. So if you join a chapter in your region, you can plug in that way. Just become a member of Common Ground USA and you will plug in to the whole movement. And you'll get connected to how to start building the movement where you live. So absolutely, Common Ground USA. Your town council, your city or town council is the way to, and Ed has written an open letter to mayors you can use as a template. And others of us, like our Baltimore project, we're working with city council members. Also, we need state enabling legislation. So we're working with legislators for Baltimore. But yeah, starting with your local city council. Yeah, just getting a handful of people together, you could form a local chapter.
What I'm seeing is the historic tension battle of the colonizers versus the victims, and something about human nature at the mercy of those who will ever want more than their fair share, and how more urgent maybe than ever, because technology allows those who would be exploiters to really bring us to the brink and the edge of cliffs right now that wasn't possible when it was the British Empire dominating certain continents, and then it was the Spanish Empire dominating certain continents. So it's to rouse those who feel they are powerless and you can't fight City Hall, and leverage John Kennedy's example, Martin Luther King's example, Gandhi's example. You be the example of doing what's right because it's right, and it doesn't matter the bricks and the bottles they may throw at you.
I don't want people to forget, even though I say you have to act locally, I do think that we have this global opportunity in terms of trying to get this into, and we are going to try to get this to RFK and the other presidential candidates, but we do feel that our chance clearly, is clearly with RFK at a personal level. And that idea that and again, this is something that we have to get into the system. So that's what I'm trying to encourage people to think about. And what we're going to do is whatever we create to basically educate RFK, whatever it is, we're going to make that available. It'll be, the basic information. I think, Alanna and I have been talking about what we need to do to have the right amount of the basic information that gets someone enough up to speed to know that it's real, that it's workable, and that it has a history that is so impressive that, you just can't ignore it.
And speaking of not ignoring things, paying hypervigilance to what happens in this roundtable, Wendell Fitzgerald has unmuted. What does that mean, Wendell?
Nothing and everything, of course. Yeah,
I had my hope. You got my hopes up.
Well, I could. The issue for me is it's not. I talked with Ed Dodson earlier today, and it's the land issue, of course, but the source of of unearned income is much larger. There are other sources of unearned income. It's at least 40. I don't think that land value by itself is, maybe it's 35%, maybe. But there's much more unearned income. It's probably at least 40%, maybe 50%. It's not clear. I don't know that we have a way to measure all of that. And all of that needs to be taxed away. And when we do it, it doesn't create any negative economic results. So banks, profits of banks, of the monopolies, the unnecessary returns to people who patent things, all of that stuff. So anybody who's got a privilege to keep going forward with, because they earned the right, or they have bought the government to give them these rights and privileges. It's certainly the land issue is completely, it makes it crystal clear. But oh wow, it's a little bit larger. It's way larger than that. So local
transformation and a transformation into Georgist economics contains no longer taxing what we work to earn, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Untaxed earned incomes from labor and unmonopolized capital, and the rest. If land value, the land rent is clearly unearned completely. But that's why untax the building, tax the land value to the full extent of the rental value, and then go look to see, well, where else is there unearned income? Well, there's a lot of different sources. For example, a more recent thing that we've all gone through is COVID and big pharma, and government has been bought by big pharma and the oil companies and all of that. And big pharma in particular was relieved of legal liability for all harm done. Whatever money they put in their pocket because of that is an unearned income. Fine, we won't sue you, but you have to pay us the rent.
You can promise not to sue them. I'm kidding.
I mean, they're already being sued, but
Right.
government wants to handle all those cases. Fine.
Right.
That all comes mostly out of earned incomes. It's all of that. So
Before I invite, thank you so much, Rundle. Before I invite our panelists to give their final thoughts, I want to encourage all now to go down to those three dots, hit save chat to capture. And this video playback, when it's on YouTube within a couple of weeks at Valediction Vision on YouTube, I encourage all of us here who hear my voice to grab that link. And this is something to send to people for the rest of your lives. This was a really rich roundtable. Who would like the first final word?
I will, because I want who was it who brought up the technology problem? Who commented on that a couple of minutes ago?
Me.
I wanted the concern, the information technology is so powerful. I put this in the chat also, is that we now can do what's called land value mapping, detailed maps, parcel by parcel, who owns what land where, how much is it worth, who would pay what under various degrees of the tax shift, who would pay more, who would pay less. We've looked at the poorest areas of our cities. Is an example of an internal colonialism where the few who own most of the land, the people, the poor people paying the rents, the rent money is going outside of the community to richer areas. So if we can tackle this right where we live, it's so important. And we can do that with this very powerful information technology. Maybe we can have a roundtable in the future where we really introduce the work that's being done on that. So I want to thank everybody for participating, having your heart and mind connected for this past hour and a half or so with these key ideas. Who knows what kind of synchronicities and wonderful coincidences this conversation will bring to us. I perceive many, many. And to get engaged, again, if you can go to Common Ground-USA and sign up for members there, and internationally, the IU.org, the International Union for Land Value Taxation, and get on our free newsletter. And that will get you connected to move along. And thank you, everybody, Robert, Kris, Bruce, Paul, and Liz for igniting and beginning these conversations.
My final thought before Paul and Liz and then Kris is underscoring how excited I am at the idea that everyone who learns about these things will demand that their presidential candidate of choice address it. Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould.
Elizabeth.
Okay, well, I wanted to mention the fact that we are working on a project that actually has a date. It is the United Nations Spring Equinox event that will come up March 19th. And we will be sending everybody information very soon to get you up to speed and familiar about the history and why this is important. And it's something that we're building up to. So in conjunction with our attempt to try to get information to RFK and the other presidential candidates and get it into the national dialogue, okay, we have this international event to really begin to focus on too. So just to let you know, if you're here and we don't have your email address, please put it in the chat.
Yep.
I think this is something that we need to do. We need to create a human world for our children and our grandchildren and those who follow us. And this is the moment we need to do it. It's been left up to us, so we can't fail in this. We have to succeed.
Amen.
Amen.
Kris Millegan.
Well, I'm going to end with the questions I started with. Why are we here? And what can we do? And, it's not, why am I here and what can I do? Because we're all related. We're all together here on this beautiful planet. So again, it's why are we here? And what can we do to make this a better place for our children, for their children, for the future? Amen.
Yep.
Thank you, Kris.
Onwards to a better future.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Everyone. Thank you.